Welcome to Our Hen House. This is Marianne Sullivan.
And this is Jasmine Singer.
And this week, Jasmine will be speaking with Lisa Dumas, who is the founder of Black, Brown, and Diverse Plant-Based People for Equity, and is working to eliminate some of the cultural stigmas and accessibility barriers for multicultural consumers in incorporating vegan foods into their diets. Such a great project.
And guess where she's based?
Where could it be? Where could it be? Someplace fabulous, I bet.
It's in Rochester. Like, I got a press release for this and I was like, wow, this is so cool. And then it's in Rochester. And I was like, what? So it's very cool. Exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I have just a preview. I have a little story in Rising Anxieties this week that is also in Rochester. So this is a very local episode this week. It's also, I think we should just start off acknowledging a really, really sad week in both of our lives, of course, especially in Jasmine's, and just a really, really tough time. And I just want to acknowledge that. And you can tell us what happened. But I also would like you, if you're willing to do a reading from the beautiful Substack you did to memorialize your beloved dog Birdie, who died this week.
Yeah, it's always very difficult when you do a weekly podcast to know how you're going to show up. And I mean, I think that our listeners know by now that we show up as ourselves and we come on the air anyway. And I'm just doing my best to get through this. Birdie died very suddenly and was my soulmate dog with me 24/7. And in fact, I'm recording this in my home office, which is also my studio. And I'm, as soon as we finish recording, going to leave and just work on my laptop in the living room, because Birdie was with me in the office all the time and was constantly in the background of my interviews, and probably for the next couple months will be referenced, as these interviews have already been recorded, and frequently people notice her in the back, halfway through. So I will, in an effort to save myself from needing to come up with words right now, I will read the Substack, and thank you for that. It is my newsletter. That's a Substack. It's jasminesinger.substack.com. And I called it The Saddest. And this will be about 10 minutes. The Saddest. Today we said goodbye to our sweet Birdie. This is not a message I thought I'd write anytime soon. We are dizzy and delirious. It doesn't seem real. We were not prepared. We lost our Birdie this morning very suddenly. She was a soulmate. We are devastated. Since Moore and I adopted her 2.5 years ago when Birdie was 13, this little doggie and I have been completely inseparable. Some Chihuahuas choose a person, and that person becomes their magnet. Being Birdie's person has been the most meaningful role I've ever played. I am completely at a loss as to how this happened so quickly. Birdie had been completely stable, even though she suffered from a very bad heart murmur. She was so stable that her cardiologist said we could put off her next visit. Nothing was changing with her health. Nothing was worsening. But she was a delicate, sensitive doggie, which we knew. On Saturday, our incredible vet came over. We use a home visit vet for a standard checkup for Birdie, George Dog, and Stella Cat. They drew some blood from Birdie for a regular senior panel, and they had a hard time finding a vein, which was uncomfortable for her. They kept poking. They also expressed her anal glands, which had always been an issue for her, and though she has always hated getting that done, she was much more comfortable afterward. Nothing else notable happened during the visit. They cut her nails and just checked her in general. Her blood work came back picture perfect. And yet, the stress from the vet visit got to her more than she let on. Shortly after the vet left, I noticed Birdie wasn't acting like herself. She was very subdued and at one point flopped over on the couch and didn't right herself. We took her outside and she could hardly use her legs. We took her back inside and she threw up. We alerted our vet as to what was happening and all agreed to just keep an eye on her. A few hours later, I was becoming increasingly concerned. Her breathing started to become very fast and she couldn't get a full breath. So we took her to the emergency vet, and after just one glance, she was treated as the most urgent. But the ultrasound and x-ray didn't show anything, so at 1 a.m., they returned her to us. On Sunday morning, I tried to get in touch with her cardiologist as we were told it was likely a heart issue. We were able to get an emergency visit with our cardiologist for Monday, today, at a location about 2 hours away. Sunday night, last night, Birdie kept getting worse and worse. Her breathing was labored and she was mostly limp. Our appointment could not come fast enough. So on Monday morning, today, instead of waiting to take her to the cardiologist, we took her back to the emergency vet. By the time we got there, she was clearly having a neurological event. Her legs were basically stuck straight out and her head was bent back. She was hardly responsive. They took her into triage and came back to tell us what we pretty much already knew by then. She wouldn't be able to continue to breathe on her own, and her state was extremely unlikely to be reversible. We made the heartbreaking decision to let her go. It was not a decision I thought we'd have to make anytime soon. Everything led us to believe that she'd likely make it to around 17. That's what we hoped for, and that's what seemed realistic. There are no words to make sense of this, but I will say this. When people find out that Maura and I have adopted 2 seniors, Sweet George is still with us, and we already had a senior dog, our darling Lucy left us earlier this year, they would immediately say, I could never do that. What I'm sure they meant is that it would be too heartbreaking to have a dog for such a relatively short amount of time and then quickly be thrust into the oftentimes heart-wrenching end-of-life care. I've thought about that a lot. And of course, I can see what they mean. There's nothing I wish more today than for Birdie and I to have had many more years together. Now, I am at least months away from being able to make sense of any of this, or maybe I'll never make sense of it, but I do know this. The entire time we had Birdie, it was the abundance and joy I was focused on. It was the vitality, the silliness, and the great big love. Birdie and I brought each other so much adoration, comfort, and connection that it's hard to believe she hasn't been with me my whole life. I think maybe she has somehow. It was never the pending loss I was thinking about when she'd do the backstroke on the rug each night after her walk, or take long walks with me every morning when we lived in West Hollywood, or wedge herself between me and the side of the couch whenever I'd do my early morning writing. It was her presence, not her potential absence, that filled our days and nights. My memories of her still feel tangible, like they're right there, and I can somehow reach them if I try hard enough. I blink, and there we are, navigating a socially distant handoff in a parking lot in March 2020, the day Birdie became ours. That night, we put her in the doggy bed beside our human bed. Within 5 seconds, she ran up the tiny stairs and made her way in between me and Moore, pawing at the blanket until I lifted it up so she could nestle between us where she has slept for the past 2.5 years. I blink. Birdie is on my outstretched legs on the small patio of our apartment, staying with me for hours as I did my work under that hot LA sun. It was soon after that the storefronts in my city were literally boarded up because of the threat of riots, and our city's curfew was set for 4 p.m., forcing the dogs to do their business in our building's courtyard. We snuggled extra close on those nights. I blink. We are moving back to the East Coast, spending our days in a rented RV, traveling from West Hollywood to New York's Catskills. Then we're all walking in the woods, Lucy and Birdie spending so much time sniffing around that we made it about 1/8 of the trail before having to turn around before it got dark. I blink. We're all taking real estate reconnaissance trips up to Rochester, the dogs in the backseat dog bed, happier than ever about the long days on the road. Then we found a new home. We moved in. Birdie spent those first weeks in a sling attached to me. Before long, she developed her routine. This is when she does the backstroke. This is when she eats. This is when she gets the zoomies. This is when she barks at the cat. This is when she insists I pet her with both hands. This is when, how, and where we sleep. This is how we live and how we love. Her adamance about being petted when it was time was hilariously demanding. It reminds me of a time I was babysitting my niece when she was about 4. I was caught up in some personal drama, paying more attention to my phone than to her. She came into the room I was in, furiously crossed her arms, and reprimanded me. "Auntie Jasmine, you're going to waste all of our time together." She was right. I put down my phone. I was back in the moment. Birdie was similarly demanding, always insisting I remain firmly in the moment with her, cuddling her, petting her, loving her with my whole self. And so I didn't have much time to focus on the possibility that one day her loss would break my heart. I get it. I do. when people say they can't adopt a senior. To be totally honest, I'm not entirely sure I'll do it again. But my time with Birdie was full, all-consuming, and created enough love to fill the universe. As I type this from my backyard, by my hammock that just yesterday I stayed in all afternoon with Birdie on my chest, my sweet old George dog is staring up at me, giving and receiving love in his own sweet and subtle way. There is no world where I could possibly understand not having these old darlings. There is no moment I won't cherish. And today, on this day that I could not have predicted in a million years, Moore and I are heartbroken. Birdie was my very best friend. We were each other's emotional support animals. Our love was as powerful as it comes, and her loss has left me bereft. But I know that our connection was a gift of epic proportions, thanks partly to the lesson my niece taught me all those years ago. With Birdie, I was always firmly planted in the moment. Today, I feel like the saddest person in the world, but also the luckiest. As my grandmother, who was twice widowed, used to say, I don't think I lost them. I think I had them. I had Birdie. She had me. And her connection with Moore, though different, was also incredibly profound, laced with a deep care, affection, and silliness that brings on a whole different layer of grief. Because when we see those around us mourning, it cracks us in an entirely different place. And so my heart breaks for Moore because that is its own great big loss. And for George Dog, who spent much of the past 2.5 years sleeping curled up with his sister. And on some level, my heart breaks for Stella Cat, whose favorite pastime has been playfully and perhaps a little maniacally bopping her sister Birdie. George, you'd better get ready, buddy. Now, I am an atheist, but I am also spiritual and, to an extent, witchy. The only way I got through the great big loss of my grandma, another soulmate, was by deciding she was with me at all times. I don't mean with me like some ghost would be, but with me as in I feel her. I feel her worldview informing mine. I feel myself trying to live up to her values, her generosity, her kindness. It is the only way I know how to get through loss. And so that is how I will get through this. Birdie taught me about unconditional love in a way I'd never experienced. I am better for that, and I believe Birdie was too. She knew when to be demanding when she had a need, how to effectively communicate everything from dissatisfaction to deep affection, and what it looks like to be truly devoted. She was an empath, an explorer, and a truly perfect companion. She was as cute as she was smart, and even though she was deaf and mostly blind, she always knew how to get to where she wanted to go. I will miss her when I sleep, when I work, when I write, when I get ready in the morning, and when I come home from being out. For the rest of my life, I am certain I will think of her every single day. Eventually, the tears will transform to smiles, and I will continue to feel Birdie in the sun, in the trees, and in the lake. 2.5 years ago, she came into my heart, and even though she's gone, she will remain there forever. Birdie, thank you for being ours.
Well, it's really beautiful. It's a beautiful tribute. Thanks for sharing it with us. Like compared to the grief that you guys are experiencing, I don't even want to talk about mine in that way. But I think we should remember how far our dogs reach, because I really miss her too. I loved that dog. When I walked in your house, she would not know who it was, and she would be a little like, she was Chihuahua, so she would be a little like, "Argh." And then I would put my hand out, and she would smell me, and immediately her whole aspect would change. She knew it was me. Her little tail would wag. So yeah, we all lost somebody special.
I mean, the day on Saturday after the vet visit, I was like, something's going on with Birdie. Moore and I had tickets to this like boat tour and I was like, well, the vet just said, just let her rest, keep an eye on her. So you came over and stayed with her, and she just slept the whole time. She was more or less fine. And then I came home and I just was like, something's up with her. But I'm glad you were able to spend that last little bit of time with her.
I am as well. I felt like, maybe she would have gotten a little scared.
Yeah.
Even though I couldn't tell she wasn't feeling well, she probably really wasn't by then. So that makes me happy.
Honestly, this was sort of my worst nightmare. I recognize that she was old, but genuinely, she was fine. Like vitality and dogginess, and like her blood work was perfect, and her heart condition wasn't getting worse. And, it's just, I think we just have to, I don't really know.
Yeah, I don't think any of us know. Like, it's always just, well, anyway, let's move on, because there is something to move on to. And it's not the best time of year for this to be happening this year, but it is always a really important day for you, and important day for our hen house. And that's your birthday, which is coming up. And I know this year it's a little different, but let's talk about it a little, because you always do make a big deal about your birthday, but sometimes in different ways.
Well, so thank you. This is airing on October 29th, and my birthday is October 30th. So my birthday is tomorrow at the time you're listening to this, since I'm sure everyone listens immediately. And yeah, like, I love birthdays. I love markers in time. I love your birthday. I love whoever's listening to this. I love your birthday. I love these sort of clean slates we get to create. We've always joked that my birthday kicks off the holiday season. I love the holiday season. So it is a very sad birthday for me this year, but I'm going to continue on with the plans that I made. And just, if I'm going to be fucking sad during them, I'm going to be fucking sad during them. And it is, as you mentioned, an important time for our hen house, because my birthday is always the kickoff of our end of year fundraising, where we do the vast majority of our fundraising for the year. As you know, our hen house is a nonprofit, and so we need to raise the money to keep going. And we do that through a mix of grants and personal donations. Think of it like PBS or NPR, which is we're a similar model as them. And
a little smaller, just a tiny bit smaller.
Tiny bit, yeah. But I do like to mention PBS and NPR, because people sometimes are confused as to why a podcast would be a nonprofit. And I'm like, you actually listen to other podcasts that are part of a nonprofit. So between now and the end of the year, all donations that you make as our listeners will be tripled, dollar for dollar, up to $20,000. And that's thanks to a group of incredible people who we call our barnyard benefactors, who it's a small group of people. They collectively pooled $20,000, and that is matched by you, hopefully, our listeners, our general public, our flock members. And so any donation you make will be matched, and that means it will be $40,000. That is matched by another donor. So it's a triple match, equaling $60,000 total. So it's a pretty big deal.
I just want to apologize for the fact that we understand we have the most complicated fundraising apparatus in the world. But the basic point is if you donate money, we're going to get even more money at this time of year, and that's how we keep going all year long.
And for the longest time, we were like, is this too complicated? And, because fundraising shouldn't be presented in a complicated way. But honestly, like, we've been doing this for so many years, and it every year is how it works for us. So thank you for supporting our efforts. I know that if you're listening to this, media is important to you. Changing the world for animals is important to you. If you are a flock member, please consider renewing. If you're able to renew at a higher level, that would be amazing. I will say that we are in the process of producing some ethically sourced, absolutely stunning brass pins with the Our Hen House logo, and we're going to be sending them to anyone who has donated $250 or more. So if you would like a brass pin, please consider making a donation of $250. But if you're able to make a smaller donation, that is wonderful too. Our flock membership is $100 for a year, or a monthly donation of $10 a month, but $100 a year between now and the end of the year will make a bigger difference for us. And if you're only able to donate like $10, we absolutely love that too. And we so appreciate you. And if you're not able to donate, totally understandable. Times are hard. Feel free to share this podcast, leave a friendly review. Whatever you can do to support our efforts to change the world for animals is greatly appreciated.
Certainly is. And it would just really, really mean a lot to us right at this point to be able to make this match and keep going another year. There is one more thing I wanted to talk about. Well, actually, there's a couple of more things I wanted to talk about. But one is kind of this weird thing, but it's this expression I came across, and I just thought it was a really good week. I've been putting off talking about it for a few weeks. It was a really good point to talk. And it's an expression in Irish. It's Evenas Cree, and I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. But if you've ever seen Irish or Irish Gaelic written, it has like a million letters in it that you don't know how to pronounce. But I think it's Evenas Cree. And it basically means gladness of heart. That's the translation. But I think from what I've read about it, it means so much more for that. And I've really been clinging to this idea. It means not happiness or not everyday happiness, which is also important, but kind of a deep-hearted, deep in your heart kind of joy in life. And it's really, I find it really hard to remember to try to feel that in days of grief as you are right now and so many people are, and in days of fear as so many of us are, and with the election coming up and climate change and just the everyday knowledge we all live with of what's happening to animals, it really doesn't feel right to feel joyful. That just doesn't sound right. But for me, this is a different kind of joy, or I try to make it a different kind of joy, just deep in your heart to feel that goodness. And so I just wanted to share it with people and should maybe share it with you today as just something to remember. Like somewhere in you, Evenas Cree, somewhere in you, inside you, is this spark of joy. And this is not a spiritual thing or I guess maybe a little spiritual, but it's not a religious thing at all. It doesn't have to be. For people who are religious, I would imagine there's a religious aspect to it. But for people who aren't, I think this is also accessible. Just finding, like as I said, the translation is gladness of heart. That's not a very good translation, but try to hang on to it.
Well, first of all, this phrase is impossible to spell unless you're familiar with the language. So I think we'll put it in the show notes spelled correctly, because you should have seen the way I tried to spell it when you first said it. It was hilarious. And secondly, I appreciate that you're bringing this up, especially this week of all weeks for me personally. And I like the idea of opting into joy. I often talk about opting into hope, but I think opting into joyful moments, even if they're also melancholic. Is that a word? Melancholic?
I believe it is.
Okay. Even if they're also melancholic, that it's okay, this is what it means to feel and love and lose and be in the moment. And I like it.
Yeah, I think this kind of joy, if that's the right word for it, can coexist with all these other feelings, such as grief and sadness. And it's not separate. It's not an alternate. It's not, I'm either happy or sad. This is something that can always be there, this spark of joy that exists in spite of everything else that's going on. And sometimes I find hope, as I've discussed a million times on this podcast, a little elusive. I don't feel like I can rely on it all the time, but this feels more like something I can rely on. Anyway, I don't know whether any of that made sense at all, but
I like it.
Well, as long as you like it, who cares? Well, actually, we do care what you all think. We really do. Before we get to our interview, I mentioned I have one more thing, and this is actually an announcement that we received from Cruelty Free International. And I particularly wanted to not let it pass by because of my beloved Fox and Eugene, one of whom you may have heard meowing throughout this podcast because he's driving me nuts. But it is October 29th, the day this podcast goes up, National Cat Day. So happy National Cat Day. And Cruelty Free International, obviously, they don't want to just celebrate National Cat Day, but they want to do something helpful for cats. And it is, of course, a day to encourage cat adoption and learn more about the ways to improve the lives of cats. And they want to emphasize this federal bill that is currently apparently gaining some attention in Congress. And it aims to ensure that cats who are used in laboratories, and there are a lot of them, sadly, 18,000 used in experiments in the United States every year. They want to make sure that, like some recent progress that's been made for other animals, that they have a chance to find their forever homes across the country. So even when cats and other animals survive an experiment, they're often killed and discarded if they are considered no longer useful to the laboratory, when they could instead be released for adoption into loving homes. So this Companion Animal Release from Experiments Act, which has been championed by California Congressman Tony Cardenas, could ensure that cats, as well as dogs and rabbits, are put up for adoption rather than killed when no longer wanted for experiments in laboratories that receive taxpayer funding from the National Institutes of Health. As I mentioned, there's been some progress on this in various states, but this would be a federal bill, and it would also be covering dogs and rabbits. But of course, today we're talking about the cats. And Congressman Cardenas said it's simple. If a research facility uses pets for research, then they must work to find them homes. And nobody who works for Cruelty Free International is ignoring the fact that we want it all to end. This is a stopgap, but a really, really important one, and something that we might be able to pull off now. So you can advance the CARE Act by contacting your representative and asking them to become a co-sponsor of the bill. Representatives can be contacted at bit.ly/CARE Act 22. Or you can also go to the Cruelty Free International website and check out more information about this. All right.
We'll put in the show notes too.
Yeah. And the other thing, I'm just going to remind you once again, if you're not registered to vote, register to vote, register to vote, register to vote.
Even if you're a cat.
Even register your cat to vote. Don't tell them I said that. And you can find out more information on that in the show notes as well. All right. Time for the interview? I think so, because this is a great interview. You've been putting up with listening to us, so we did get to listen to Jasmine's beautiful tribute, so that's okay. Lisa Dumas began her career working in marketing and communications for diversity consulting firm The Winters Group. She is presently a freelance journalist and editor, and in June of this year, she created Black, Brown, and Diverse Plant-Based People for Equity, Inc. And she is also the founder of the Facebook group, Black, Brown, and Diverse Vegans. This is a great interview with a very imaginative and progressive approach to getting more people to consider veganism. So I am very happy to say, let's get to that interview now.
Hey everyone, Jasmine here. Did you know that you can dedicate a podcast episode to someone you love? Cool, right? For $250, you can honor a loved one, human or non, and at the same time support our Henhouse's efforts to change the world for animals. You can either record a 30-second special message that we'll play on the air, we'll just need an MP3 file, or you can send us the text you want recorded and we'll record it for you. To dedicate a podcast episode, simply let us know by emailing communications@ourhenhouse.org. And thank you so much for your support. By the way, since this is $250, it will automatically make you a Flock member. If you have any questions about that, let us know in your email. Can't wait to hear from you. Welcome to our hen house, Lisa.
Hi, Jasmine. So nice to be with you today.
I'm very excited to talk to you. I have to tell you, when I heard about your organization, I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds amazing. And then I kept reading and I realized you were in Rochester. And I think I might have started jumping up and down. I am fairly new to Rochester. Like I've been here for a year and we have to become best friends is basically the point of what I'm saying, if that's okay.
Yeah,
Okay, perfect. Well, then I think that we don't need to go on. I've accomplished everything I've wanted to. All right, I'm kidding. I have a lot of questions. Okay, let's start off by talking about the problem as you see it, and then we'll get into some of the solutions that you're pursuing. So to start, Lisa, what are some of the barriers that underserved communities face in obtaining healthy plant-based foods?
Well, the problem with Rochester, so you and I are both in Rochester, like you were just saying, is that there is a high level of poverty here. So when you have high levels of poverty in underserved communities, which are mostly Black and Brown communities, there are a lot of negative outcomes, such as lack of access to healthy foods and information about health and wellness. And in Rochester in particular, which you probably also saw from some information that I sent, it's surprising because it's the home of Wegmans, which is a large supermarket chain, one of the largest in the country. Yet we're just surrounded by food deserts. So not only can you not get to plant-based items, you can't really get to any items other than whatever's overpriced in your corner store or your local family dollar store. Dollar stores are on every corner, and you have to try to make your way out to the suburbs to get to an actual grocery store. So those are just some of the basic problems.
I have so many questions. I want to ask about Wegmans, but I'll hold off for a second. What's his research show about the willingness of people in these communities to shift their diets in a plant-based direction if it is made more accessible?
Research does show that people are open to it, and actually diverse groups of people, they want to eat more healthy and they want to shift their diets, but there's a certain stigma surrounding it in their communities, which can hold them back. And there's also that lack of access that we're talking about, and also affordability. That ties into many other things. It even ties into plant-based companies and foods, hopefully one day being able to bring their prices down. So to me, it's just, it's kind of a complex issue, but it's a combination of things that can keep people from being able to actually access those items, even if they want to.
So true. There's a lot going on here, and it's issues that I think a lot of people, even vegans, don't really think about nearly as much as it should be not only thought about, but directly addressed. You've cited research which shows that more than half of Latinx and Black respondents strongly or somewhat agree that there is a stigma in their culture around people who eat plant-based foods. Have you found this to be the case? And if so, how do you overcome it? I mean, that's a big question. Like, I'm basically asking you to solve everything.
Right. If only I could. Yeah, I definitely find that to be the case. I have to approach it very specifically and not in a pushy kind of way. Also understanding when people might say, I might want to eat this, or I might want to, but I need to still be able to have bacon or something like, because and certain things are staples in certain communities. So I like to approach it by just saying, maybe even trying Meatless Monday, or telling people that there are things that are accidentally vegan that they're eating that they might not even know that are vegan, like Oreos. So you're not aware the Captain Crunch cereals are vegan. And if you approach it in that way, then people realize that they don't have to lose out on things that they like, which is something that people often think. I think that's with anybody when it comes to veganism as well.
Totally true. Yeah. And it is, of course, the opposite. It's like a very abundant way of eating, but it does, I'm saying that also from a place of privilege. I'm saying that in an area that is not underserved, and I am not part of an underserved community. How would you say plant-based food companies are failing these communities?
Oh, goodness. Well, I have many opinions, Jasmine.
I love it. I love it. Let's bring it.
I think I'll just kind of start whatever comes to my brain. Like in a basic supermarket, say you have organic produce. I know we need to use chemicals. Well, they use chemicals when things are not organic so that they can make more and have more for people, for the large population that we have globally in this country, whatever. But if things are better for you organically, I don't understand why it's not just made that way. We have so many advances in science today, in my opinion, they could probably come up with something that would still allow them to have the crops grow and be abundant for everyone without poisoning people. And when it comes to plant-based food companies, I mean, even I, who may not live in, real abject poverty, I look at some of these items and I just think that the prices are high. And I would think that if you would lower your prices and come down, that difference would make up in the quantity that you're able to sell. So I don't understand, because they are high. And now with meat prices going up, there should be a switch inevitably to more plant-based items on a broad scale anyway. And it should, and I don't know if I'm correct about this, but cost less to make if you're not using animal products. So why is it that they are so high? I mean, if they were cheaper, because that's another thing that can also be a barrier. I don't want to offend anyone, but I sometimes get a little bit, annoyed at things like that. And I even think about organizations like PETA, because I wish that PETA would spread their message in these communities as well. I see them talking about animal rights and things like that, but I don't think that they necessarily get to those communities either. So I think people have to make a more concerted effort to reach people in those ways. I don't necessarily know that that's being done.
Yeah. I think we're on the same page in a lot of ways with what you just said.
It's like you said, though, you don't think about it, though. Like you were saying, coming from a privileged place or another place.
Yeah.
Because even I, in going into this thinking about diverse populations, did not think about all diverse populations. I mean, I just joined a deaf vegan group in Rochester on Facebook recently. And then I thought about that and I said, well, okay, so I have another group and I posted how to say the word vegan in American Sign Language, because I never even thought of that.
Wow.
You know what I mean? As being part of diversity. And then I went and looked on YouTube and saw that there's a blind vegan with a YouTube page and she shows how she makes all of her foods and things. So, it can even branch out into all other areas that we don't always think about,
By the way, we do offer written transcripts of our interviews. So be sure to share the written transcript of this with that Facebook group, because they would probably really appreciate everything you're saying. So I wanted to go back to Captain Crunch for a second, because you just mentioned it. And of course, we all know that vegan foods aren't always healthy. I would say the vast majority of people listening to this, including myself, are motivated by ethics, not by health. But we know that, of course, it's always good to cut out meat, dairy, and eggs. But when you focus your messaging on health, how do you deal with vegan junk food?
To me, right now, when you're talking about these communities that you want to encourage to switch, most people are intelligent people, and everyone knows that fruits and vegetables are good for you. I mean, I can remember being a kid and hearing you had to get that 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day. And I would think to myself, how in the heck am I supposed to get 5 servings of fruits and vegetables with all the other stuff I'm eating? But little did we know that was all we should have probably been eating,
Right.
So most people already know that. But to get them to say to make this switch, they need to know that it's not going to be as difficult as they may think. Like, oh, I just have to give up everything, everything I've ever loved. And in the communities that I'm talking about, also, when you don't have those grocery stores, when you only have a Family Dollar, if you're going to go in there and get some cereal, you want to get the one that's going to be the best choice. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I think it's important to let people know those things, even though it may be, may seem like junk food, but it's still a healthier alternative. And I think in this type of situation, you have to approach it that way.
Yeah, I think that's really true. Now, you mentioned Rochester at the beginning. You mentioned Wegmans. I want to go back to that. I know that you're starting a program in Rochester that you hope to take nationwide. And I do want to talk about those plans. But first, let's go back to Rochester. What do you think Rochester needs most? And what is keeping it from getting there?
Oh, boy.
I know. I'm sorry. I should have warned you to have an extra cup of coffee.
It's just the problems are so vast here. I work in journalism, and up until a few years ago, I was actually covering a lot of things in the city, and I became really kind of disenchanted with the whole thing because I was kind of seated from a viewpoint where I was needing to stay objective because I was news writing, but I had all these opinions because I would see when it comes to politics, I believe, first of all politics are local. You need to have the right people in place. Rochester has a lot of people that get in there and stay in there, but they're not really change agents. So Rochester, from the 1960s, there was an event that it's been documented. There was a documentary made called The Riots of '64, because during the Civil Rights Movement, Rochester was the first city in the North that needed to have the National Guard called to it because of race riots. So when I learned about this, I saw the neighborhoods that were involved in this, the same underserved communities where there was systemic racism, discrimination, are the same communities that are having these problems today. So therefore, we need to figure out why these communities are still having these problems, what we can do to change that. I think they need to change the communities. The neighborhoods in Rochester do not work the way they're set up. There's become concentrated poverty within the city. There was also a white flight during the 60s and 70s where whites moved to the suburbs. They took their votes with them. And so then the people in the city became neglected. So it's all just part of this sad cycle that has happened in many places around the country. And in order to change that, you have to have people that can get in there and think outside the box. I mean, Rochester has something called the Rochester Monroe County Poverty Initiative. It's called RMAPI. And Rochester Monroe County Anti-Poverty Initiative. And for a long time, they couldn't figure it out. Governor Cuomo gave them a bunch of money before he stepped out of office. Back a few years ago when I was covering it. And now they've got new leadership. And I did see the last thing I saw was that they decided to test out some universal basic income, which a new incoming mayor has also decided to do. But you've got to think about things like that in order to help people get the lift that they need. So I could go on for days. You just stop me whenever you want. But there are many things. It's complex, like I was saying, that you could do in the city. But you need people that are really going to be change agents, not people that are going to sit there and you have the same problems for 10, 20, 30 years.
You mentioned you were a journalist. Were you with WXXI or somewhere else?
I was doing like some freelance for a small local paper. They were minority owned, and they were basically trying to cover the issues in these areas. And then I started going in and doing a little bit more full-time editing. I hesitate to mention their name because, in some ways they were actually part of the problem, because I became more aware of sometimes how things can go on behind the scenes or not go on just based on politics of news writing, politics of journalism even, which is part of what I became disenchanted with. And it's different when you're covering things locally that involve politics and people, and people are connected. But I did that for about 4 years, and I also stepped away from it now for about the past 2 years. And I even stopped looking at the news, to tell you the truth, not just because of the pandemic, but because it can become frustrating when you see that things are not getting done, maybe why they're not getting done, who cares, who doesn't, who appears to care, who doesn't. It's complex.
The reason I went on that tangent is because I find that fascinating, like with writers, journalists, and also artists or photographers, like war photographers, for example. At what point are we just sort of reporting on what's going on? And at what point do we step in and make a difference or state a claim? Or is it making a difference? Is it stating an opinion to just be there, at the crossfire, reporting on the story or photographing the story? That's something that rattles around my head a lot. And I think it's really fascinating that you were like, no, I need to be at the forefront of making change here. I can't just be reporting on it.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because when you go to school for journalism, also when I went to print journalism, they pounded into your head to be objective, especially for news writing. You keep your opinion out of it. It's like journalism 101. And so I had done it for a very long time. And then I realized all of a sudden that I have an opinion. In fact, I have many opinions. You know what I mean? And so you get to a point, I think, where you have to make decisions, about what you want to do, what you want your life to mean and be. This is something that I believe in. So I just decided that I would rather spend my time doing something that I believe in and making a difference rather than doing something that could possibly make a difference, but was not having the impact that maybe it could or should.
Yeah, no, I totally hear that. Okay, I want to talk about Wegmans, but for our listeners who aren't in Rochester, I think that this is relevant to you too. I think this is relevant to everyone because we all have a Wegmans. Maybe it's not a Wegmans, but it's a Whole Foods, or maybe it's a different grocery store. I have heard a bit here and there about the issues here where Wegmans is not in areas where underserved communities can get to. And I've heard some other issues too, but you're very much more in the know too. So do you mind explaining to our listeners what's going on here?
Well, I can't tell you exactly what's going on because I don't know what Wegmans' thinking is, but I can tell you that they used to have a couple of stores in the city. They used to have one on Mount Hope, where College Avenue is, College Town is now. It's near a university where there are lots of shops and stores.
That's where I live.
Okay, they used to have one there. They redeveloped it. It was on Mount Hope Avenue. I remember because it was convenient for me because I used to live near there. And then there was one, I think, on a place called street called Dewey Avenue, which is now a Price Right, I think, which is one of the few locations where it's a small grocery store in the city. But I read in the Democrat and Chronicle at some point that Wegmans had plans to expand within the city, but they scrapped it. So my guess is, and I'm just going to tie it to a short story if I can tell you really quick.
I would love that. Yeah.
I went to, the service light came out of my car. So someone said to me, well, you could just go to like one of these local auto places. And we have a place called AutoZone, Advanced Auto. And he said they'll plug in this little machine and tell you what it means. And he said they do it free of charge. So I said, okay. I was on a street called Lyle Avenue in the city of Rochester, which is a very neglected, I would say probably problem area, people would call it. There's a car shop that I would go to there sometimes as well. So anyways, I go to an AutoZone because I passed right by there that this person told me to go to. I stopped there. I say, so do you have this machine? I explain whatever. And the guy says, no, we don't have one here because we cannot have that machine because of the demographic in the area. So I said, okay. He said, but my sister location, just past Long Pond Road, they can do it for you there. I said Long Pond Road, and I don't know if you know where that is, but it's far away outside the city, going to a suburb called Greece, basically. I said, oh my goodness. So I said, what about the one on Clinton Avenue, another area in the city? He said, nope, same thing there. We can't have it there because of the demographic in the city. I said, oh my goodness, so this is just a shame. So basically, instead of figuring out a way to find out what the problem is why you can't have a simple machine that you can take outside and plug into someone's car and provide this service. I have to drive to the suburbs. So basically, to me, it's the same thing because of the demographic, probably where Wegmans were located, probably if they had problems, they said, we're just going to go out to the suburbs. So you have to travel very far to get these basic services that other people can just have whenever they need them. So to me, it's like there's a larger issue there. Like, why not fix the problem or focus on the problem in the city so that you can have your store there, so that I can get this service, so that other people who can get this service there may not be inconvenienced like I was that day as well. Wegmans, they may have the problem with theft or, losing their assets or whatever it may be. I mean, I'm sure they would have insurance, first of all. But secondly, now when I go to the Wegmans in Gates, which is straight out that same road, Lyle Avenue, you go out and you're in another place called Gates, New York. I see police standing there at the door, armed police as though they're on duty. So the problems, if you do that, are not going to stay in the city. The city's going to deteriorate as it has, but they're going to go right out there down that road and they're going to be at that Wegmans anyway. So to me, it makes more sense to fix the problems in the city rather than just try to move and avoid them, because when you avoid or try to avoid a problem, it doesn't go away. It's still there. It gets worse, and it's not probably going to make its way to you anyway in the end.
Right.
So that's just how I see it.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is like a problem everywhere. It's very much related to dietary racism, and it would be nice if these giant monstrosities like Wegmans, like Whole Foods, can do more instead of just optically. I recognize that there's a lot of healthy foods available at these places, a lot of plant-based foods, but that's not going to do very much if they're only reaching people who might even have the means to go further for it in the first place. So let's switch gears, and I want to hear about the Food That Slaps program. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, that's one of the programs that we're hoping to be able to implement. And it's really just kind of trying to use a term. If people don't know what the term slaps means, it just means that it's good. Like how way back in the days, people would say, oh, food, that's the bomb or something. So now just culturally, we're just wanting to use that term to connect with people because it's changed now. They say, oh, if something's good, they'll say that slaps,
Oh, good to know. Thank you. I'm taking notes because I'm never up on what people are saying.
Yeah. I know it changes so fast, but they'll say, that Impossible Whopper slaps, at Burger King if they like it, So for people to, to kind of speak in terms culturally that people will get, we're trying to go in to different communities where culture matters, and it does. So we like to have pop-up events and using that as kind of like our slogan and offer people free plant-based items to try, give people information about things that are accidentally vegan like we were talking about. Hopefully also one day even start a mobile food pantry so that we can just drive to these places. Because right now what we're thinking with the pop-up events is to do it at the corner store where people are locally, just going directly into their neighborhoods. I mean, we don't want to kind of do this in places where we're not getting to the people that we want to get to. So we want to just go in there. We want to meet people where they are.
Mm-hmm. And I know that under the Food That Slaps program, there's free grocery giveaways and health-related pop-up events, and also hosting events at community centers like churches and bodegas. I think that's really cool. How do you plan on getting people there? Like, what is going to appeal to folks who would benefit from the Food That Slaps program?
We're just giving free stuff to people. So
that alone, got it.
Yeah. Yes, we still strategically have to figure out. I mean, churches and community centers are easier. Corner stores and bodegas and things like that, we can advertise. We can just show up there and literally pop up, which is what we may want to do because, I want to keep people safe as well. And like I said, it's a complex situation. Some events, like at a church or community center, may be more appropriate to say, we'll be here this date, and time. Other places like corner stores and bodegas, you never know kind of what's happening and what other people are thinking about. If, just to be honest, to say we're going to be here this date and time, giving away free stuff, sometimes there can be activity going on or could take place that we may not want to have meet us there. So those places we may just pop up. They're always frequented by members of the community. So we'll just be there to give away our stuff.
Yeah, cool. That's amazing. How are you working with restaurants in underserved areas?
So we are planning to, and I say planning because a lot of it's preemptive because we're very new. So these are the programs that we are going to be implementing. But we are going into restaurants because many times, like, there are a lot of ethnic restaurants, Jamaican restaurants in these communities. There are a lot of restaurants serving Hispanic foods and things like that. And I'll go in there. I went into a Jamaican restaurant. I thought it was really cool because she had a sign in her window that said, just pay as much as you can. So I just went into, for whatever you wanted. So I was just asking her a little bit about that. And then I had said, hey, do you have any vegan items on your menu? And she said, well, not really. She said, I have to learn more about that, find out more about that. And right now, people just kind of get like cabbage and rice, vegetables. I just kind of thought to myself, that's boring. You know what I mean? So if we could basically go to these restaurants, say, go back to that restaurant and take her some jackfruit, maybe a recipe to make some curry jackfruit, just to give them menu guidance. And there are also some restaurants that are already doing that here. I don't know if you've ever heard of a restaurant called Alice Kitchen. I've been meaning to connect with them because I think if we can connect with some people that are already doing that, they can also help with giving guidance to others. So,
yeah. From what I'm understanding, it's like a two-way street. There's restaurants like the one you just mentioned that could have more vegan options or a vegan option. And then on the flip side, there's vegan restaurants that might be able to have even one item, hopefully more, that's like pay what you can, which it does remind me of what Cafe Gratitude did. I was living in LA for a while, and Cafe Gratitude had like a community bowl that people were able to pay what they want. So it seems to be like both sides here.
Yeah, I've heard about something like that too. I'm originally from the southern tier area of New York, and there's a little coffee shop there where they have something called a pay it forward tree. And so people can like purchase a receipt, basically. You pay for, it's like a blank receipt, and they put it on this tree. And if someone came in and needed that or needed to pay for the balance, they just take that receipt and they get what they need. I think things like that are so cool.
I love it. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and so it basically, it is like a two-way street, like what you're saying. So I myself and my board members, these are the things that we talk about that we want to do and we want to get out there and get started doing. We just need the community to galvanize around us, yeah.
Truthfully, that sounds just like exactly the kind of project I've been wanting to get involved with. How does your small business loan program work?
We were also talking about the fact that these things are changing. We just kind of want to help with the pushing, make sure that the word gets to everyone. But I mean, if you think about McDonald's testing the Beyond Burger, or you think about Burger King adding the Impossible Burger and whatever they might be doing in the future, they are changing. So we also want to have other programs in place. And one of them would be offering micro loans for small businesses, because say someone wanted to start a nonprofit like this, we could maybe give them a micro loan to pay their filing fees. You know what I mean? So you don't have to worry about the money. Pay to file for your tax exempt status. Pay your filing fees to start a small business. So we want to help doing, being able to offer those to people. And then our only requirement is that they hopefully can maybe pay that forward to someone else in the future, because we don't want to get into a situation where we're expecting people to pay us back. It's not what this is about. We want to give people things and give people resources and give people help they need, because I think when you get into, loans that have to be paid back, it's just going to be another albatross around someone's neck. That is another thing that just only fosters more negative outcomes.
Yeah. And I mean, this is an interesting time to be interviewing you because you are just starting this. I know that you do have ideas for future programs. You mentioned a few of them. You mentioned the food pantry, which I'm so excited about. I would love to help with that too. Are there any other projects that are up your sleeve? I know you want to work with schools. What's going on?
Yeah, so we definitely want to, when it comes to restaurants and giving them that menu item guidance for plant-based items, we would like to start a plant-based restaurant week here in Rochester. So say a restaurant put a plant-based item on their menu, maybe during that week they could feature it on the menu, they could offer it at a discount. We could have other restaurants that are already vegan feature something for that week and just bring attention to it in that way. And then when it comes to schools, I mean, you mentioned coming from LA. I mean, I don't know, you probably heard, I'm sure, about Gavin Newsom just investing like $700 million in schools in California for plant-based menu items to be after school menus. Mayor Eric Adams in New York City did the same thing with offering plant-based items to students. So we just feel like that's something that we should be able to do here. And the school district in Rochester is a whole nother story. I mean, but it can only help, I would think, students to be able to, and the most complaints that you have when it comes to something like that is that they're not offering the right thing that students want, blah, blah, blah. They had some issues with that in New York City, but there are some districts that have done it well. And I think Portland is one of them that I read. So maybe we could give some guidance on that, and show some models that are actually working. But it's just, another way to help get the message out there.
Totally. Do you ever focus or do you ever bring in environmental and animal rights messages? How are they received, or do we just kind of deal with the in front of us emergency to begin with?
Well, right now, that's kind of how we're looking at it, is like the immediate need. But of course, those things play into it. I mean, when I first went vegan, it was because I read Alicia Silverstone's book. That first book she wrote was like 2010. It was like the Kind Diet or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I was always looking for different diets and things like that. And then I read that. This made sense to me, where she said, milk is bad for your body, animal products are bad for your body, dairy, meat. And she explained it in such an easy way for me to understand. And then later for me, I kind of thought about the animal rights aspect of it and the ethical aspect that there is for it. And by the way, our logo, that is on purpose. It says everyone's value is equal. Not everyone altogether, everyone. Because now we have come to also that point where one of my board members, animal activism is a big thing for him. And that's another thing. We want to kind of have diversity of thought throughout the whole organization. But I think now, just starting off with what we're trying to do is getting that message out there. And then I feel like the rest will come with the evolution of it. And so right now we have to, just kind of focus on getting people to kind of even understand our message, and kind of align with it.
I totally think that's the right way to go. And I'm just utterly thrilled to hear about all of your work. I know you're growing so much. How can people learn more about your work, follow you, and support your efforts?
Oh, thank you so much for mentioning that. Yeah, they can go to our website at equalvalueforall.wordpress.com. And when you get there, you can click on ways to help. And it'll show you all the different ways. Right now, we have a fundraising campaign with t-shirts that are really cool. Like we were just talking about earlier, one of them says, I love plant-based food that slaps. So you can go look at all the different messages that we have. And then when you purchase a t-shirt, 100% of the profits go to Black, brown, and diverse plant-based people for equity. We also have a little like children's cookbook on there. It's called 5 freakishly fun plant-based shortcuts to food your kids will love. And it's got like, I'll just tell you one of the recipes in there. It's got like one of those little hacks. Like, I don't know if you saw quite a while ago, but there was this thing online where people would take like a box cake mix. And a lot of those are accidentally vegan, by the way. And they would just put in a can of soda or use a can of coconut milk. That's all you need. You basically make your cake. So there are little like few shortcuts in there that kids would like and that are plant-based, but the profits are all coming to us. So anyway, you'd like to contribute to us if you'd like to get something in return for your contribution. That's one way. Another way is to simply donate to us. But we do have to say that we're only able to solicit donations in New York State because that's the only state that we are currently registered in as a charity. By law, you have to be registered in any state that you solicit donations in. There are like 9 states, I think, where it's not required. Iowa, Idaho, Delaware, and also Wyoming, Nebraska. Those are a few. We have them listed on our website. You'll see that all under ways to help. We are currently still in the process of filing for tax-exempt status. So you would, once you receive that status, need to consult with a tax professional if you just gave us a donation where you wanted to receive that exemption and find out whether you'd be eligible for that. But we're currently in the process of filing for that.
So what is the website again?
It's Equal Value for All.
Equal Value for All. Okay.
Yeah, .wordpress.com. And we are currently on Facebook in the process of getting all the social media together. And by the time this airs, you'll have that information from me for your viewers. So you can hopefully post all the links to that on your website as well.
Yeah, definitely. We'll post everything in the show notes that we can. And that's really amazing. I'm definitely going to buy that t-shirt today, probably. And truly, whatever you need, just feel free to reach out. By the way, I don't want to be giving bad advice here, but I do think that with the solicitations, I think that what you find in the books is a little bit antiquated because the nonprofit laws existed before the internet did. So I think that as long as you're not doing physical mailings in people's mailboxes, it's perfectly okay to solicit over email or social media.
Okay. Oh, I think that's so funny because I was thinking that. I thought to myself, people can just go on the New York State Charities Bureau, search for our name and see that we're listed as a charity. So that must be antiquated because at some time they must have wanted you to be listed in every state so that a person could search for you in every state. But with the internet, anyone could search the New York State website and still see us there. So that does make sense. Yeah.
Right. And also, I think that there are thresholds for soliciting. So if you raise like more than $20,000 in a particular state, for example, and this varies state to state, so it's annoyingly confusing, but you only need to register in it. Like, for example, we have a large donor in New Jersey, so we register in New Jersey as well. But we could talk about this offline too, if you ever want to chat about it, because our hen house is a nonprofit. And so I have definitely been through all of that. And I know it's very confusing. But things like this are especially confusing. Anyway, I'm getting completely off track here, but I just want to reiterate for our listeners that we will include all of the links that you said in the show notes, and so that people can find you and follow you online. It's equalvalueforall.wordpress.com. And I hope that you stay on with me a little bit for the bonus content, Lisa, but thank you so much for spending time with our hen house today. And I really appreciate all that you're doing so much.
Oh, no problem. Thank you so much for having me, Jasmine.
Greetings, listeners. Just a reminder that if you are a Flock member, you will get a link to the bonus segment in your email on the Tuesday after this podcast episode goes up, or you can always find it on the Flock Facebook group. And if you're not a member of the flock and you can afford it, you can join for $10 a month or $100 a year at ourhenhouse.org/donate.
Also, if you are a flock member, please join us for our flock First Friday Zoom calls, which are once a month on the first Friday of the month at 4 p.m. Eastern, where we have inspiring guests and great conversations about activism and animals and life in general.
So if you're a member of the flock, check out that flock Facebook group for updates or write to us at info@ourhenhouse.org. And if you write to info@ourhenhouse.org, you can also set up a one-on-one conversation with me too, which I hope you do because I always have a lot of fun and I want you to also.
And thanks so much for joining us in our mission to change the world for animals.
Bye.
Anxieties are rising. Wegmans should continue to ignore PETA. All right, this is an article that I have kind of a personal interest in, and it's from Watt Poultry. And the reason I have a personal interest is because it has to do with Wegmans grocery store, which is a very big deal up here in Rochester, New York, where I live. And it's a chain. It's not a nationwide chain, but it's in a bunch of different states. And, I've always had kind of a dislike of Wegmans, even though it is, it's a very good grocery store. It's a little more upscale than Tops or whatever, and that not quite at the Whole Foods level, but you get where I'm going. But years and years ago, Wegmans used to have its own battery cage facilities, and some activists broke into one and took out some chickens and did some filming. This was a long time ago, way before the current efforts of direct action everywhere. And Wegmans just really, really went after them. And they have enormous influence with the local prosecutor, and they were prosecuted. And the one who did not plead out ended up going to prison. And now that I'm talking about it, I'm mad all over again. Anyway, that doesn't have anything to do with what's going on now. I digress. There's a little animal rights history there. So what's going on now is this Plainville Farms turkey situation, which you may have heard of, and it has to do with an undercover investigation done by PETA. And they went in and they found horrendous abuse. And what happened, as so often happens, is that the people who work there were charged with crimes which they committed, horrific cruelty, mistreatment of the turkeys, and 130 charges were filed against the farm workers. No charges were filed against the executives or the company. And which, I hate to see this happen this way. The company should be charged when this happens. But of course, it's always the way. So now, apparently, Wegmans is a buyer of Plainville Farms turkey. And so PETA has decided to do these demonstrations against Wegmans, which is, a fairly classic way. As this article points out, this is from Watt Poultry, I think I mentioned that. A grocer wants to keep selling Plainville Farms turkey. It shouldn't have to answer to disruptive animal rights organization. I'm not sure why. Okay. I guess that's what you think. This is by one Roy Graber. And he points out that PETA is continuing its push to get Wegmans to remove Plainville Farms turkey, and talks about the charges that were filed. And PETA pointed out that PETA even went so far as to suggest Wegmans should not only go themselves to see what's going on at Plainville Farms, but should take a PETA representative with them to farm visits. Excuse me, says Roy. Okay, it seems like a good idea to me. Wegmans has not responded to PETA's protest, so they staged an actual protest outside of a store in Rochester, New York, and undoubtedly, according to Roy, caused stress to store employees and scared away potential customers. Well, good. That's the idea. Isn't that the whole purpose here? Isn't that why Wegmans should be concerned here? They've certainly chased me away from any possibility that I am going back to Wegmans. I have plenty of other places to shop. I have a lovely food co-op that I can shop at. According to Roy, we can deduce that Wegmans selling any animal-based food product is unacceptable to PETA. Well, I suppose that's true, but, we're animal rights activists, so we're used to, targeting specific things instead of just pointing out that the whole sordid business should be abolished. Indulging PETA simply wouldn't be a productive use of Wegmans' time. Why is he going on and on about this? Why is it so important? They really do not want these stories engaged upon. They want it to die so badly. So apparently Wegmans is cooperating with this idea that they should not care. Of course, Plainville Farms is saying, the usual defense, oh my God, we're so shocked that our employees would do this. That wasn't an actual quote is, we are fully cooperating with law enforcement in order to investigate the PETA allegations and fully support the prosecution of any individuals found to be involved in the mistreatment of any of our turkeys. Regardless of the outcome of that investigation, none of the individuals addressed in the PETA allegations work for Plainville Farms any longer. So as usual, they just wait for an animal rights organization to do the investigation that they don't do, and then pretend they're shocked. So in addition to terminating the 13 workers, according to this article, the company purchased body cameras to monitor all live operations team members. Well, that seems like a good idea, doesn't it? With the surveillance footage, wait for it, being routinely monitored internally and by outside third-party animal welfare experts. Well, put it on the web, guys. Just put it on the web. Why don't we, maybe we should be able to make up our own minds about how you're treating your turkeys. But according to Roy, if Wegmans believes Plainville Farms has the turkey's best interest in mind, that's good enough for me. Yeah, Plainville Farms really has the turkey's best interest in mind. Vomit. I just hate them all, All right, this is from Drovers. Moo Intelligence. Google's new sustainability initiative misrepresents U.S. beef. This is by Greg Henderson. And this is about this new initiative from Google that they are going to offer the ability to view information about the environmental impact of certain choices, not just food, has to do with clothing and cars and whatever. He points out, quote, despite all of those nerds on the payroll, Google is shorthanded on Moo Intelligence. Like, what does that even mean? I don't know. And it just insulted America's cowboys with its new sustainable feature. Like, people in the beef industry just love to call themselves cowboys. They just love it. Oh, who do you think you're fooling? So according to this article, the information that Google is going to be posting includes information about how Google evaluates beef, which is to say Google's metrics are heavily slanted against beef. Then he just goes on and on to talk about how slanted they are. I just want to, why would Google do that? Google isn't in the alternative to beef industry. They don't care. No motive is pointed out for why they would be. I'm sure they all eat, or most everybody at Google eats beef. But of course, this quickly drew the ire of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, which denounced Google's initiative as an attempt to bias consumers against beef. Yeah, they just have a thing about beef. They want to bias people against it. Quote, Google is using its billions of dollars of resources. Now, wait a second. I know Google has billions of dollars of resources, but are they really spending billions on this particular thing? To target cattle producers and ignore the science that demonstrates beef's sustainability and value to the environment. Yeah, that's from the president of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. That's one of those aforementioned cowboys. And they just go on and on about their nonsensical numbers that they think beef is contributing when everybody else in the world, except for the industry, agrees that beef has got to go. According to them, eliminating all livestock in the U.S. and removing beef from the diet would only reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 0.36% globally. Aside from the fact that their numbers are undoubtedly off, you're comparing, you're taking just U.S. and just livestock or just beef, it's not really clear, and then taking that and subtracting it from every single greenhouse gas emitted by anything in the entire world and using that percentage. So even if, I'm sure their numbers are still cooked. Even if they were real numbers, that's a ridiculous kind of comparison to make. Finally, California's Prop 12, Nyman Purdue agrees. I just thought this was an interesting article since we are talking a lot about Prop 12 recently, which is, of course, the initiative in California that, puts certain limits on what meat can be sold in California and has the pork industry up in arms and up in the Supreme Court trying to argue that should not be allowed. And this is just kind of an interesting article showing that there's a lot of dispute within the industry about whether this arguing is a good idea. It's talking about Nyman Ranch, which now is owned by Purdue Farms. and how Nyman Ranch came out in favor of Prop 12 and filed a brief in the Supreme Court. So there is a split within the industry. According to this, Nyman Purdue, I'm not sure Purdue filed a brief, but Nyman is owned by Purdue, but that doesn't mean there can be a split within the companies. So I'm not sure of that. But anyway, Nyman Purdue has staked out a position supporting Prop 12, which outlaws constrictive hog gestation stalls, among other animal protein restrictive raising practices. That's a nice expression, isn't it? Animal protein restrictive raising practices. These animals, they more and more, they just call them protein. They don't call them creatures. The article points out that other than the pork industry, everybody just kind of complied with the law. It's my feeling that they probably knew that what they were doing was completely unacceptable to the American public. So they were kind of trying to get on a new abusive practice that would be in compliance with Prop 12 and wouldn't set so many people on fire. And if you can get the whole industry to be doing it, then, they're not in competition with each other. But the pork industry is definitely not on board with that. They're fighting. And this guy, Matt Graves, who writes the Meet Your Markets column, he doesn't think it's such a good idea. Unfortunately, our meat and poultry industry has been rife with those who have tried to mandate that all who raise animals for food do so to the lowest common denominator. Those who dared to step outside of the ordinary and do something different were castigated, but many of those who wanted to do it differently persevered, resulting in a plethora of natural, organic, grass-fed, free-range. And now there are those who want to raise hogs and layer hens in larger spaces than those raised conventionally. And he thinks this is all to the good, that this hasn't harmed other conventional meat and poultry companies. And these outlier, quote unquote, outlier companies return more dollars to the farmers and ranchers while giving consumers a wider choice of animal proteins. So I don't know, what does one think about this? Is he right? And if so, what does that mean for animals? Like obviously, if we can get them out of a worse circle of hell and make their lives a little bit better, or a little less worse, that's a good thing. But is it really true that people are buying this bullshit? That hogs or pigs who are raised just because the gestation crate isn't used are not treated horrifically cruelly? Sometimes it would be nice if we could just bring a little sanity to this conversation. But I guess that's not going to happen. But it is interesting, I think, to see this split within the meat industry about how to handle these issues. And that's it for this week's Rising Anxieties.
Well, that's it for this week's show. If you like the podcast, we're asking for your support as we kick off our end-of-year fundraising. We're excited to announce that if you contribute between now and December 31st, your donation will be tripled, dollar for dollar, up to $20,000. That means that with your donation, plus our Barnyard benefactors and an added boost from an anonymous donor, we're hoping to raise $60,000 for the year end. This is the time where we do the vast majority of fundraising for our entire year. If you're not already part of the flock, we invite you to join for $10 a month or $100 a year. You'll get some really cool perks, including weekly bonus content, access to our private Flock Facebook group, which will soon be upgraded into a brand new platform, and an invitation to our monthly Flock Friday Zoom meetings for fun and engaging conversations with me, Marianne, and others in the flock. You will also have an opportunity to meet with me for one-on-one sessions to discuss your veganism, your activism, or whatever's on your mind. Plus, if you donate $100 or more, I will send you a personalized video message to show you my undying love and gratitude. And brand new this year, if you donate $250 or more, you will get that plus a really cool Our Hen House pin. So if you appreciate Our Hen House, if you believe in our mission to effectively mainstream the movement to end the exploitation of animals, if you find community and solace in our shows and resources, and if you believe in the change-making power of indie media, please make a donation before December 31st, and your donation will be tripled. Contributions of any amount are greatly appreciated. To support us today, visit ourhenhouse.org/donate. That's ourhenhouse.org/donate. Another great way to support us is to leave a fabulous review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, like us on Facebook, where you can also leave us a review, or follow us on Twitter and Instagram @OurHenHouse. If you shop on Amazon, you can use Amazon Smile using our henhouse as your favorite charity. And of course, tell your friends about us. If you're one of our listeners who already supports us, thank you so much. And thank you to my co-host, Marianne Sullivan, to Vicki Beechler for her work in producing this podcast, to composer Michael Herron for the music. Thanks to Eric Montgomery of the Podcast Haven for his work editing this podcast, to our production assistant, Jocelyn Martinez, and to Veronica Kalinska, who designed our amazing logos and other graphics. We'll be back next week with a brand new show, so don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Jasmine Singer. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.